Hello, my name's Maura, and my parents pushed me down the stairs during a family argument, all because I refused to hand over the $500,000 home I bought with my own money. It didn't start with violence. It started with guilt, with silence, with, "You know your sister needs it more." Then came the public shaming, the smear campaign, the staged fall at my front door, and the lawsuit claiming I caused emotional harm to a pregnant woman. They weren't just trying to take a house. They were trying to take my voice. But what kind of family does that to their own daughter? And what happens when she finally says no? I pulled into my parents' driveway with a strawberry tart boxed up beside me, still warm from the bakery. My mother had asked me to bring dessert. Her little favorite, she said on the phone, too cheerful, too rehearsed. Something about her voice had itched at the back of my neck all week, but I'd brushed it off. It was a family dinner after all. We did this maybe 3 times a year. No one went nuclear at roast beef and mashed potatoes, right? The house looked the same as always, like time had stopped somewhere around 1998. Same shutters, same chipped porch rail, but the number of cars outside was off. I recognized Aunt Rachel's Lexus, Uncle Jim's beat-up Ford, even my cousin Melissa's minivan. The whole clan had shown up like it was Thanksgiving, but it was just an ordinary Saturday in February. Inside, it was worse. Everyone was already gathered in the living room, dressed more formally than any of us had bothered for years. Skylar wore a pale pink maternity dress, her hands folded delicately over her belly like she was posing for a Hallmark card. Dorian, her boyfriend, stood stiff beside her, the human embodiment of "don't make eye contact." My mom swept across the room like a pageant host. "There she is! Maura, sweetie!" she beamed. "You're just in time." Her tone set off alarms in my chest. I handed over the tart and forced a smile. "Is this some kind of occasion I missed?" I asked, scanning the faces around me. They were too bright, too still, like waiting for a scene to begin. "Oh, nothing formal, just family," she said, and patted my shoulder a beat too long. "Go on and sit. Dinner's almost ready." I moved to the dining room. The good china was out, only used for holidays or strategic guilt plays. I didn't sit. My gut was already in a knot. Dinner began quietly enough. Plates passed, small talk floated around like helium, but the undertone was unmistakable. One by one, the conversation drifted to Skylar. "Poor thing," Aunt Rachel murmured. "Must be hard renting that little place with a baby on the way." Uncle Jim added, "Back in my day, family made room when things got tight." I said nothing. I didn't even lift my fork. Then my father, who hadn't looked up from his plate once, spoke. "Well, Maura's place is more than big enough. 2 bedrooms, no roommates, no kids, plenty of space." My jaw locked. Skylar shifted in her chair and looked down at her napkin. I stared at the roasted carrots on my plate. That was it. That was the approach. They weren't even being subtle. Mom stood up then, tapped her glass like it was a wedding toast. "Thank you all for coming," she announced, smile sharp and glinting. "I have wonderful news. Our Skylar is expecting." The table broke into applause and clucks of approval. Skylar beamed and placed a hand on her belly, but still didn't look at me. "And," Mom continued, "we've all been thinking about what family really means, about supporting one another in difficult times." I froze. "And Maura, darling," she said, turning toward me, "since you've been blessed with that beautiful apartment, debt-free no less, we think it would be a lovely gesture for you to gift it to Skylar and Dorian. I mean, surely you don't need all that space alone." The silence in my ears was louder than any shout. I blinked once, slowly. "I'm sorry. What?" "You heard me," Mom said brightly, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "Skylar needs a home and you have one. It's only fair." I looked around the table. No one met my eyes. My hands started to tremble, not with fear, rage. "I worked for that apartment. Every weekend, every late night, every skipped vacation, I earned it." Dad cleared his throat. "Don't be dramatic, Maura. It's just an apartment." "Just," I said. "It's my entire adult life in square footage." Skylar's lip trembled. "I didn't ask for this," she whispered, but she hadn't stopped it either. "Look," I said, keeping my voice steady, "I'm not giving my home away. That's final." The room fell into a heavy silence. Aunt Rachel muttered under her breath, "So cold." Uncle Jim sighed. "She's always been selfish." I pushed my chair back. "I think I should go." And then it happened. My mother picked up the water glass in front of her. With a flick of her wrist, she hurled it straight into my face. Cold, sudden, humiliating. Gasps echoed around the table, but no one stood up. No one came to my side. I stood there, water dripping from my hair, my sweater clinging to my chest, breath shallow and tight in my throat. "I cannot believe you just did that," I whispered. "Believe it," she snapped. "Maybe it'll cool down that attitude of yours." I turned slowly, grabbing my bag off the chair. Not one relative said a word. As I walked to the door, droplets trailing behind me, I looked back just once at their dry, indifferent faces and realized something sharp and ugly. I was never really part of this family. I was just a contingency plan. I didn't slam the door behind me. That would have given them a reaction to feed on. Instead, I walked calmly, my steps steady despite the water still clinging to my hair and collar. My mother's glass had soaked through my sweater, turning the fabric cold and clingy, but I refused to shiver in front of them. Not tonight. Upstairs, the hallway lights were dim, the old bulbs casting a yellow glow across the floorboards. I made my way toward the guest bathroom at the end of the hall, a space I'd used during every holiday visit, an uncomfortable overnight stay. As I closed the door behind me, I locked it, not just out of habit, but to draw a line they couldn't cross without force. I stood in front of the mirror and stared at my reflection, hair damp, mascara bleeding faintly beneath my eyes. I should have felt devastated, but strangely, all I felt was clarity. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It hadn't spiraled out of nowhere. No, this had been planned, orchestrated. From the moment Mom called me last week to bring dessert, this had been set up. A soft knock interrupted my thoughts. "Maura?" It was Skylar. I didn't answer. "I didn't know they'd go that far," she said, her voice wobbling. "We just thought maybe if you heard it all together from the family." I turned the faucet on, loud enough to drown her out. After a minute, her footsteps faded. Coward. I washed my face, dried it slowly, then took a deep breath. I wasn't staying another minute. When I stepped back into the hallway, several family members were gathered near the top of the stairs. My mom, arms crossed. Aunt Rachel, whispering something to Uncle Jim. Skylar hovered behind them, chewing her lip like a guilty child. And at the center, blocking the stairs like some patriarchal bouncer, was my father. I walked toward him, my gaze even. "I'm leaving," I said. "No, you're not," he replied, his voice low. "You think you can walk out after what you just pulled?" "What I pulled?" I laughed once, short and sharp. "You set me up like I was a pawn on your board, and when I didn't play along, Mom threw water in my face." "You embarrassed your mother," he growled. "She embarrassed herself." "You're so wrapped up in your own ego you can't see what your sister's going through. She's pregnant, Maura. She needs help." "She needs boundaries," I snapped. "What she doesn't need is to steal a home I worked 10 years to earn." "You don't need that much space," he said, shaking his head. "You live alone." "That's because I earned the right to choose who's in my space." "You think you're better than the rest of us?" he asked, stepping forward. "No," I said quietly. "I think I'm just not for sale." Skylar whimpered behind him. "Stop, please." And then it happened. In one fluid, furious motion, my father shoved me, hard. His hand landed square on my shoulder, and the world tilted. I stumbled backward, heels slipping on the wood, and tumbled down the staircase. My elbow hit first, sharp pain flaring, then my hip, then wrist, then nothing but a thud as I landed awkwardly at the bottom. Silence swallowed the room. For a few seconds, all I could hear was my own breath, shaky and ragged. I looked up the stairs. No one moved. No one screamed, not even Skylar. They just stood there, frozen in the amber light, watching. I pulled myself upright with my uninjured hand, cradling my wrist. My elbow throbbed, and the side of my thigh burned from the impact. But what hurt more than anything, more than the fall, the betrayal, the insults, was the look on their faces. They weren't shocked, they weren't horrified. They were just waiting to see what I'd do next, as if pushing me down a flight of stairs was just another move in their playbook. I stood slowly, forcing every muscle to obey. "Don't touch me," I said when my mother finally took a step forward. "I wasn't," she started. "You were," I cut her off. "You all were." I limped to the coat rack, grabbed my bag with shaking fingers, and turned toward the door. No one reached for me. Not one person apologized. Not one voice called my name. I drove home in silence. Every bump in the road sent lightning through my elbow. My wrist was swelling, and I knew I'd need ice, maybe even a splint. But I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even swear. I just kept thinking. They wanted the apartment so badly, they were willing to hurt me for it. Back in my apartment, I peeled off my wet clothes, swapped them for sweats, and pressed a bag of frozen peas to my arm. The swelling had already started to color, deep blue spreading like ink under my skin. I walked to the mirror in my bathroom, the one I installed myself last fall. The one with the soft, adjustable light and matte black frame I picked out on a random Sunday after finally paying off the last of my credit card debt. My reflection stared back, bruised, tired, but not broken. Not anymore. I wasn't going back there. Not for an apology. Not for closure. And sure as hell not for another ambush. I finally understood. The people who hurt you the most will often share your last name. After rinsing off the dried sweat and shame, I sat on the edge of my bed with my wrist in a bandage and my thoughts moving far too fast. The apartment was quiet, but not in a lonely way, more like the kind of stillness that lets truth echo louder. I had left the bathroom light on. Its soft glow bled out into the hallway, casting long shadows on the half-painted walls and unopened boxes I still hadn't dealt with. My elbow throbbed with every breath, and my wrist pulsed under the tight wrap. A dull ache crept into my shoulders, but I didn't reach for more painkillers. Not yet. Instead, I stared at the open can of gray paint I'd chosen myself, sitting in the corner of the living room floor. Next to it, a roller tray I hadn't cleaned properly. On the kitchen counter, a screwdriver from the night I replaced the cabinet handles. The bookshelf I assembled, crooked but standing. These weren't just home projects. They were markers of my effort. Every brushstroke and screw was a receipt of ownership. This apartment was mine. No one had given it to me. No one had gifted me the down payment. I didn't marry into it, didn't win it in a divorce, didn't inherit it out of pity. I earned every inch. The silence let my memories in, like the time I was 22 and fresh out of college. I had just started my first real job, entry-level marketing assistant, laughably underpaid, and had to back out of a weekend visit. Mom called sobbing, said she thought she was having heart palpitations. I rushed home terrified, only to find her perfectly fine, watching Jeopardy with a bag of popcorn. When I asked about her health, she laughed and said, "Well, stress is real, you know. Seeing my daughters helps." Or when Aunt Melissa, Mom's older sister, gave up her share of our grandmother's lake house. That place had been in the family for decades. But during a so-called family emergency, Mom told us Aunt Melissa was struggling financially and offered to relieve her of the burden. Months later, the house was sold. Melissa hasn't joined a family event since. Then there was the money. God, the money. 5 years ago, I got a call from a man named Curtis. He didn't introduce himself at first, just said my father was in trouble and someone needed to step in. Turned out, my dad had racked up $18,000 in poker debt. The lender wanted it paid or things would get complicated. I transferred the money within 48 hours. I never told a soul. Dad didn't bring it up either. Not a word of thanks. The only acknowledgement I ever got was a beer shoved into my hand at a Labor Day cookout. "You're a good kid," he'd said. That was it. I leaned back on the bed and stared at the ceiling. All of those moments. I'd brushed them aside, told myself I was overreacting. That family was messy, sure, but not malicious. That Mom's tears were real. That Dad's silence was just pride. That Skylar was overwhelmed. But no, these weren't isolated events. They were signs, patterns, proof. And I'd been blind to all of it. I reached for my phone, scrolled up to old messages from Mom. Every emoji-filled apology was followed by a guilt trip. "You know your sister really needs us right now." Or, It just hurts to be pushed aside by your own child. I stared at one in particular from last year. I guess we'll just cancel the holiday if it doesn't work for your schedule. No context, no regard. Emotional blackmail, plain and simple. I dropped the phone onto my lap and exhaled, deep and shaky. Enough. I pulled my notebook from the drawer and started listing things. Not a gratitude list, a record. Every holiday I funded, every favor I granted, every yes that cost me something. Pages filled quickly, and with each item, a heaviness lifted, replaced by something sharper, cleaner. Not hate, not yet, but recognition. Of truth. Of boundaries broken. I wasn't the cold one. I was the used one. I got up and grabbed my laptop from the kitchen counter. The battery was nearly dead, so I plugged it in and opened a browser. The first words I typed into the search bar were, Real Estate Attorney Eugene, Oregon. The top result was Quentin Lyle Esquire. 40 years of experience, property litigation, reputation for being tactful but fearless. His headshot showed a clean-shaven man in a navy suit with eyes that said, I don't blink. I saved the contact info and stared at it. I didn't call him, not yet, because even now, part of me still hesitated. What kind of daughter lawyers up against her own parents? But what kind of parents push their daughter down the stairs? No, they drew the line. I was just standing on the other side now. I shut the laptop slowly, wincing as I adjusted my wrist. My body was bruised, but the fog in my mind had cleared. The years I spent trying to win their approval, the favors, the silence, the self-erasure, all of it, gone. I had spent a lifetime earning their approval. Maybe it was time to earn back my self-respect. The morning started with a vibration. One ping, then another, and another. At first, I assumed it was just a string of work emails or some group chat I'd forgotten to mute. But as I squinted at my phone through sleep-heavy eyes, the notification bar blurred into a single flood of red dots. Facebook mentions, text messages, voicemails, Instagram DMs, even a missed call from someone I hadn't talked to in 3 years. Something was wrong. I opened Facebook first. It was the kind of mistake you only make once. My mother had posted a smiling photo of Skylar cradling her belly with a caption that made my stomach turn. It breaks my heart when family turns their back on love. Our sweet Skylar, pregnant, hopeful, and now betrayed. Some people care more about property than people. Please pray for our family. There were already over 70 comments. Neighbors, church friends, distant cousins I barely remembered. She's always been cold. I knew something was off with that girl. How can you let your pregnant sister suffer like this? Not a single person asked for my side. They didn't need it. The narrative had already been written, published, and sold. I dropped the phone onto the comforter and stared at the ceiling, bile rising in my throat. Just yesterday, I'd been trying to bandage my wrist. Now I had to figure out how to bandage my name. I forced myself out of bed, ignoring the sharp pulse in my arm. I needed air. I made coffee, black, strong enough to burn. As I took the first sip, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a text from Skylar. Please don't be mad. I didn't mean for it to go this far. My thumb hovered over the screen. She had the nerve. I scrolled down and found the link she had forgotten to remove. It led to an anonymous TikTok account. The caption read, When your own sister says this to a pregnant woman. The video wasn't a video. It was a clip of audio, my voice clear and cold. This apartment is mine. You're not entitled to anything I earned. That's all. No context, no background, no mention of staircases or screams or hospital-grade ice packs. Just my voice, chopped and served on a silver platter. The comments were even worse than the Facebook ones. Yikes, she's heartless. Hope she likes living alone forever. That baby deserves better. I wanted to scream, not because of what they were saying, but because Skylar had recorded me. That conversation, 2 days ago, had been in my living room. She'd shown up with puffy eyes and soft apologies. Said she wanted to talk woman to woman. Said she didn't want to lose her sister. She recorded the whole thing. That wasn't just betrayal. That was warfare. By noon, the ripple had reached my workplace. My manager, Jason, called me into a conference room with frosted glass walls and the kind of lighting that made you feel like you were under examination. I just wanted to check in, he said carefully. HR got a few messages from people outside the company about some social media stuff. I know, I said. It's my family. Right. He rubbed his chin. Just wanted to make sure you're okay, and to say, maybe avoid engaging online, at least until this settles. Settles? I walked out back to my desk and felt eyes trail me. One coworker offered a polite nod. 2 others pretended to be busy until I passed. In the break room, I heard someone whisper, "She kicked her pregnant sister out. That's messed up." I didn't confront them. I just took out my notebook and started writing names, timestamps, notes. I wasn't going to fight back with another post or some overly filtered selfie with a caption about inner peace. I was going to prepare. That night after dinner, chicken and spinach because pain doesn't pause hunger, I sat back down at my kitchen counter, opened my laptop again, and dialed the number I'd saved. "Quentin Lyle's office," a woman answered. "I'd like to schedule a consultation," I said, "regarding a jointly owned home and a lot of family drama." We scheduled the meeting for Monday morning. Then I printed screenshots of the Facebook post. I saved every comment, every share. I copied the TikTok video link, even though it made my blood boil. I called my building's front desk and asked about security footage access, politely, firmly, like someone with nothing to hide. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about control. They wanted a villain, someone to blame, someone to hurl shame at like a stone wall and wait for it to crack. But what they didn't realize was that shame had stopped working on me. I closed my laptop, stood in front of the window, and looked out at the street below. The world kept turning. Cars passed, dogs barked. Somewhere, someone was posting a photo of their dinner while my name was being dragged. Let them. If they wanted to turn me into the villain, they'd soon regret giving me a reason to play the part. By Monday morning, I was no longer shaking. I'd swapped out my weekend sweats for slacks and a navy blouse. Something about dressing like a lawyer's client made me feel like I belonged at that table. I parked outside the 2-story brick office building with 10 minutes to spare. Inside, the air smelled like lemon polish and quiet decisions. No shouting, no judgment, just contracts and consequences. Quentin Lyle's assistant greeted me with practiced politeness. Within minutes, I was seated in a leather chair across from a man whose gaze made it clear. This wasn't his first family implosion. He didn't waste time on small talk. "Tell me everything," he said. So I did. I gave him the will from my grandmother, the notarized inheritance documentation, screenshots of the Facebook smear, a transcript of the TikTok clip, and a written timeline of every encounter since the so-called family meeting. I laid it all on the table. Every manipulation, every bruise, every silence I'd swallowed for 30 years. When I finally stopped, he sat back, crossed his fingers, and said, "You're not crazy. You're just the first one in your family to say no." That one sentence hit harder than anything I'd heard in weeks. He nodded toward the documents. "Let's draft your formal intent to sell. Once Skylar receives this, she'll either have to buy you out or agree to list the property." I signed the papers with steady hands. That night, back in my apartment, the adrenaline had cooled, but not the clarity. My phone buzzed just past 8 p.m. A name popped up I hadn't expected. Aunt Margot. "I heard what happened. Call me if you want truth, not guilt." I stared at the message for a long minute before tapping call. Margot answered on the second ring. Her voice was low but not frail, steady, real. "I was like you once," she said. "Your mother made me feel like saying no was betrayal." She told me about the lake house, how my mom cornered her during a health scare in the 90s, made her sign over her half of the family property for the good of everyone. It was the same playbook. Emotional leverage, manufactured emergencies, guilt as currency. "She's always been good at that," Margot said. "Skylar learned from the best." I said nothing. I didn't need to. "You're not the first one they tried to break," she added. "But you're the first one who didn't crack." When we hung up, I felt something shift inside me. Not pain, not rage, just confirmation. The next morning, Quentin emailed the finalized legal notice. I paid for certified delivery. That envelope, thick and official, was heading straight to Skylar and my parents. It wasn't a threat. It was a boundary dressed in legalese. I started a folder, Family Legal, labeled it with a black Sharpie, and filed every piece of evidence behind it. Printouts, photos, mail receipts, even a list of witnesses who had seen me bruised. Then I deleted Facebook, blocked a few numbers. I wasn't running, I was fortifying. The silence from my parents had grown louder. No angry texts, no crocodile tears. Just quiet, calculated. But I'd seen this pattern before. Silence wasn't surrender. It was strategy. And this time I had my own. They wanted me to surrender quietly. But now I was making noise, and legal paper speaks louder than tears. Saturday morning arrived, wrapped in a quiet I didn't trust. The sunlight poured through my kitchen window, glinting off the stainless steel faucet as I stirred oat milk into my coffee. For a brief moment, the world was still, normal. I took a deep breath, let it out slowly, and reached for the mug with both hands, my left wrist still sore, but healing. Then came the knock. No, pounding, angry, urgent. My phone buzzed simultaneously. Dad, we need to talk. Open up. I froze, walked slowly to the door, peeked through the peephole. They were all there. Dad stood front and center, red-faced. Mom beside him, clutching her handbag like a weapon. Skylar behind them, visibly upset, one hand on her belly, the other clutching Dorian's arm like a leash. I didn't open the door. Instead, I slid my phone onto the narrow entryway table and tapped record. Screen down, mic facing out. My heart pounded, but my voice, if I spoke, would have been calm, because I was done performing panic for people who never noticed the real thing. "We raised you better than this," Dad barked. "You ungrateful child," Mom shouted louder. Skylar's voice cracked. "How could you do this to your own sister? I'm pregnant, Maura!" I leaned back against the hallway wall, arms folded. Let them yell. Let them throw their guilt like darts. "She's heartless," Mom cried. "Absolutely heartless." "You think money makes you better than family now?" Dad again. I didn't respond. I didn't give them the satisfaction. "Open this door, Maura." "Or what?" I whispered under my breath. 15 minutes passed. Maybe 20. Their voices eventually died out. I waited 5 more, heart thumping in my throat, before stepping toward the peephole again. The hallway was quiet, empty. I unlocked the door but kept the chain fastened, just enough to peek through. And then came the scream, a loud thud, followed by Mom's voice shrieking, "She shoved me! I fell!" "What?" I slammed the door shut. Dorian was yelling, "Got it on video! She pushed her! We're pressing charges!" Skylar was crying again, or pretending. It was hard to tell anymore. I backed up, snatched my phone off the table, and dialed Quentin Lyle's number immediately. His voicemail picked up. "This is Maura Evers," I said, my voice low but clear. "They're here. They staged something. I didn't touch anyone, but they're trying to set me up. I have audio. Please call me back." By evening, I was still shaken but not broken. Not this time. I hadn't left my apartment since the confrontation. I'd shut the blinds, brewed tea I didn't drink, and sat on the couch with my laptop, watching the footage from my doorbell camera again and again. The angle wasn't perfect, but the timing matched. The moment I cracked the door open, Mom threw herself sideways. Not a stumble, an act. A performance. An ugly, desperate attempt at narrative control. Then came the cherry on top, a knock at the door, this time a courier. A certified letter from Skylar's attorney. Subject: emotional distress and prenatal risk. Alleging that I'd triggered psychological trauma leading to potential complications in pregnancy. That my intentional emotional abuse was putting both mother and unborn child in danger. They had the gall to weaponize her pregnancy now. I scanned it all, calmly, then forwarded it to Quentin with one line. Need to respond. I have evidence. The next morning, a flash drive containing the full recording was in an envelope. Along with it, I added Quentin's business card and a sticky note that read, "You want legal? Let's talk legal." I dropped it in the mail myself. If they thought silence was scary, wait until they saw me loud. They wanted war. They just declared it on the wrong woman. By the time Monday came, my nerves were made of glass, clear, sharp, unbreakable. I arrived at Quentin's office in a tailored navy blazer I hadn't worn since a work gala 2 years ago. He met me at the door with a nod, then led me into the conference room. Everything smelled like printer toner and leather chairs. This wasn't home. This was battle prep. Skylar and our parents were already there. Skylar had curled her hair, wore soft pink, and clutched her belly like it was a shield. Mom was in pearls and silence. Dad kept tapping his pen on a yellow legal pad like a ticking bomb. Their attorney, a man who looked like he hadn't smiled since the Clinton administration, cleared his throat when we sat. This mediation is intended to resolve the dispute over the shared property in a civil, private manner, he began, fake calm oozing through his tone. Their side opened with sweeping claims, emotional distress, family betrayal, timing concerns given Skylar's condition. Skylar sniffled on cue. I said nothing. Quentin adjusted his tie, then opened the folder we'd prepared. We'd like to enter several exhibits into the record, he said evenly, including video, audio, and correspondence. All time-stamped, authenticated. He slid a USB across the table. The opposing lawyer hesitated, eyes narrowing. What's this? Proof, Quentin replied. He clicked play on a short clip. Just 1 minute. My parents yelling outside my apartment. My mom calling me a spoiled monster. Skylar accusing me of endangering her unborn child. My father demanding I hand over the damn house. Then, another recording. Mom's voice, clear and cold, saying to Skylar, "Make sure you sound scared. Nobody believes the calm ones." Silence filled the room. I looked across the table. Skylar's eyes widened. Then she looked down. Mom's jaw locked tight. Dad's tapping stopped. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I sat still and let the weight of the truth settle. Quentin leaned forward. Would you like to continue with emotional distress claims? Their lawyer asked for a recess, but the truth wasn't done speaking. As we returned from the break, Quentin brought out a laptop and started a Zoom call. Mr. Bill Nestor has joined us. He's a resident in Mora's building. Bill, my elderly neighbor, appeared on screen, wearing a sweater with a cat on it and adjusting his glasses. I saw them show up at her door, he said simply. Heard the yelling, saw her mom throw herself down after Mora shut the door. She never touched anyone. Are you certain? Their lawyer asked. Bill didn't flinch. I may be 76, son, but I know a fake faint when I see one. No one responded. When it ended, I stood and said, I want the sale handled legally, and I want no further contact. If that's not respected, we pursue criminal charges for attempted fraud. Skylar looked like she was about to cry again, but didn't. They agreed to review terms privately. Later that evening, as I was heating leftovers, I got a text from my coworker Janine. You need to see this. Viral. 40K views in an hour. I opened TikTok. A creator I'd never met was breaking down my family's Facebook posts, comparing timelines, voice tones, and caption changes. She'd found contradictions, pointed out the inconsistencies in my mom's broken-hearted tone versus her aggressive text to me that I'd publicly posted 2 days ago. One comment read, "This feels like emotional extortion disguised as motherhood." Another, "I don't know Mora, but I'd hire her as my crisis manager in a heartbeat." I watched it twice. They'd tried to destroy me publicly, and now, the public was watching them instead. It was no longer just a family feud. It was a reckoning, and the world had started watching. Tuesday morning, the call came in just after 9 a.m. I had just sat down with a cup of tea when Quentin's name popped up on the screen. They've agreed to settle, he said simply. The house will be sold. You'll receive your portion. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt still. After we hung up, I stared at the steam curling from my cup. No legal war, no courtroom spectacle, just the quiet click of a deal made under pressure. The same way they always operated. Once control slipped from their hands, they folded. Later that day, I found a thread on the local neighborhood forum. The family who used to live next to my cousin? Drama. Heard they tried to scam their own daughter out of her place. Glad she stood up to them. For the first time, my name wasn't the one attached to whispered blame. Their social circle had shrunk to silence. No defense, no outreach, just absence. Meanwhile, the world kept clicking. 2 days after the mediation, I got a text from my cousin. Julie, of all people. We hadn't spoken in over a year. Thought you should know. Skylar's medical records leaked. People are talking. I didn't reply, but I checked Twitter. Skylar's name was trending, not for baby shower registries or heartfelt pregnancy posts, but because someone had anonymously posted documents revealing she'd had a termination less than a year prior. The narrative of sacred motherhood shattered like stained glass. I didn't celebrate it. I didn't share it. But I watched. Dorian tried pushing back in comments. That's private. She's being bullied. Think before you post. But no one cared anymore. People who build castles out of lies can't complain when the tide comes. By Thursday, I was sitting across from my department director in her glass-walled office downtown. We've been watching how you've handled everything, she said. Composure, boundaries, integrity. I blinked. She continued. We'd like to offer you a new role, client recovery lead. You'll be the one guiding others through high-conflict situations. Pay bump, of course, more visibility. For a moment, I was too surprised to answer. Then I smiled and nodded. Yes, I'd like that very much. When I stepped outside afterward, the city looked sharper, more in focus. Not gentler, but more honest. I returned home and sat on my balcony as the sun dipped low behind the neighboring rooftops. My glass of wine balanced on the railing, untouched. Then I picked up my phone and typed the final message I'd ever sent to them. I'm done. Please don't contact me anymore. I didn't hit send with anger. There was no rage left, just resolve. Block, block, block. Then I opened a new email, changed the address, something clean, untethered. The last thing I did was sit back in my chair and exhale, deep and full. I gave them years, I whispered into the fading light. I'm giving myself the rest of my life. The apartment was quiet, but for once, it didn't feel lonely. It felt earned. They wanted me to burn for them, but I walked through the fire, and now I'm finally free. 6 months passed like a gentle tide, rolling in without ceremony. By now, the apartment looked nothing like it did when I first moved in. Boxes gone, walls painted a soft sage green, sunlight pooling on refinished hardwood floors. It smelled like lemon balm and sandalwood. Every morning, I sat on my balcony with a cup of tea and a book in hand. Sometimes fiction, sometimes nothing more than the back of the box it came in. I had the time now. Not because life slowed down, but because I stopped racing toward approval that was never mine to begin with. In the distance, I could hear construction. New condos rising in the next block, scaffolding clanging like a reminder. Something's always being built, even when something else falls apart. Skylar had the baby. A girl, I heard through a mutual acquaintance. No one called me. No photo, no invitation, not even a group text from a distant cousin. The silence didn't hurt the way it used to. One Thursday afternoon, Julie, the cousin who first warned me about Skylar's leaked records, sent another message. FYI, your parents moved in with Skylar. People are saying it's bad. Dorian lost his job. They're behind on their bills. No one's really visiting anymore. I read it twice. No gloating, no satisfaction, just the echo of choices, catching up. Some truths don't need to be spoken aloud. They show themselves in who stays and who stops knocking. Later that night, I found an old shoebox in the closet. Inside were photos. Christmas mornings, 4th of July BBQs, church picnics. I flipped through them slowly. Some faces I didn't even recognize anymore. Just ghosts in polyester. One picture stopped me. Me and Grandma on the dock at her lake house, my small hand in hers. She knew what fairness looked like. That's why she split the house evenly. Because she saw us for who we really were, beyond the favoritism, beyond the facades. I placed that photo aside. Then I wrote on a sticky note, carefully, slowly, like it was a truth I'd needed to hear years ago. It wasn't my job to fix the family. It was theirs not to break me. I lit a candle, dropped the rest of the photos in a metal bowl, and watched them curl and disappear. No rage, just release. The next morning, I met Amelia, someone from work, for coffee. Not a date, not anything complicated, just two people sharing a table, trading stories that didn't revolve around trauma. We laughed about a coworker who always brought fish to the office microwave. No one asked about Skylar, or my parents, or the firestorm from months ago, and I didn't bring it up. On the way home, I stopped at a small bookstore tucked between a bakery and a laundromat. I bought a journal, nothing fancy, just navy blue with thick cream pages. When I got home, I brewed tea, curled up in the chair by the window, and opened it. On the first page, I wrote, "This time, the story starts with me." And that was enough. The phone didn't buzz anymore. The door stayed closed. I didn't scroll for their names. I didn't replay the moments. I just let life move. There were days I still felt that old ache, the one that asks why they couldn't just love me like I loved them. But I didn't answer it anymore. It could ask all it wanted. I had nothing left to give it. Peace didn't look like winning. It looked like waking up without dread, like cooking pasta on a Tuesday just because I felt like it, like calling friends and laughing without glancing at the clock, like knowing I would never again have to explain myself to people who only ever saw me as a resource. They taught me how to survive their chaos, but I taught myself how to live without it. Before I turn the page and close this chapter, I want to leave you with something I wish someone had told me years ago, something that might have saved me a lot of confusion, heartache, and silence. You don't owe anyone your silence. Not your parents, not your relatives, not your partner, not anyone. Especially when that silence is costing you your dignity, your peace, or your sense of self. Staying quiet to keep the peace is not the same as being at peace. Yes, families can be a source of deep love and belonging, but they can also be places of pain, guilt, and unspoken rules that keep us trapped. And no, love should never be measured by how much pain you're willing to endure to keep the family together. Real love shows up in respect, in safety, in peace, not in how much you can tolerate without breaking. If you've ever been made to feel guilty for setting a boundary, if you've ever been called selfish for choosing your mental health over their comfort, if you've ever had to walk away to save yourself, I want you to hear this clearly. You are not cruel for protecting your peace. You are not ungrateful for recognizing abuse. You are not weak for walking away. In fact, sometimes walking away from those who were supposed to love and protect you, especially when they didn't, is the strongest, most courageous thing you can do. It's not a betrayal of them. It's a commitment to yourself. And if you're still out there, trying to earn the love that should have been given to you freely, trying to prove your worth to people who should have seen it from the start, I see you. Truly. I know how exhausting that is. But more importantly, I hope you start seeing yourself, seeing that you are already enough, already worthy, already whole. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to walk away from someone you thought you couldn't live without, just to finally breathe again? Do you believe loyalty should have limits, even with family? Or do you think family loyalty should be unconditional, no matter the cost? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to know your story. And if this message touched something in you, comment 1, or tell me where in the world you're watching from. I'd love to hear from you. If it didn't resonate with you, that's okay too. Tell me why, and where you're tuning in from. I welcome all voices here. If you want more content like this, raw, honest, human, stories that speak to the heart, and sometimes say the things we were never allowed to say out loud, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps keep these conversations going and these truths alive. Until next time, take care of your heart. You deserve that much.
"Are you nervous?" my husband Michael asked, watching me fidget with my clothes in front of the mirror. I was adjusting my blouse for the 10th time and couldn't stop glancing at the clock. "Yes, I am," I admitted honestly. Today was my first day at my new job, and I wanted everything to go perfectly. It was my first real job, and I was determined to make a good impression on my coworkers and bosses. I had been ready to leave on time, but Michael had offered to drive me to work, and now we were both in danger of being late. The reason for our delay was his mother, Patricia. She had shown up at our house before sunrise, crying and carrying her bags. She needed a place to stay and had offered to look after the kids while we worked. Since we didn't have much time to talk or sort things out, we quickly assured her she could make herself at home and hurried off to work, hoping everything would be fine. When we got home that evening, it became clear that giving Patricia free rein in our house might not have been the best decision. As soon as I walked through the door, I noticed something was off. My slippers were missing. After a quick search, I spotted them on Patricia's feet. She was strolling around the house, completely at ease, wearing my favorite bear-shaped slippers. These weren't just any slippers. They had been a gift from my late grandmother, and I treasured them deeply. I had always been careful with them and never let anyone else wear them. Seeing them on someone else's feet, no matter how much I cared for her, made my stomach sink. Patricia, I began politely, I thought I gave you the guest slippers earlier? I was trying to hint, gently, that it might be time to return my cherished slippers. Oh, Jessica, you did, she replied, completely calm. But they were so cold. You young people don't feel the chill the way I do. My feet hurt so much, and your slippers are so soft and warm. You don't mind, do you? You can just wear the guest ones. It's not a big deal for you, is it? Her words stung, but I forced a smile. It was a big deal for me. Those slippers held sentimental value, and I didn't want anyone else using them. But Patricia didn't know that, and I hadn't told her. Blaming myself for not speaking up earlier, I decided to let it go. As I tried to push the slippers out of my mind, something else caught my attention. Where's the living room rug? I asked, noticing the bare floor where our soft, fluffy carpet used to be. Oh, that rug was making the floor too warm, so I rolled it up and put it away, Patricia said casually, as though rearranging the house was perfectly normal. I sighed, realizing this was just the beginning of her stay. It had been one chaotic day already, and I couldn't help but wonder what surprises tomorrow might bring. I looked around, puzzled. Where's the rugs? I asked. Oh, I sent it to be cleaned, Patricia replied casually. Forgive me, my dear, but it was covered in so much dust, as if it hadn't been cleaned in years. You really need to take better care of it, or you'll be breathing in all that dust later. I frowned. But we bought it less than a month ago, and we clean it every day, I protested. Patricia shrugged, unimpressed by my response. Well, draw your own conclusions, dear. It just means you should have done a more thorough job of cleaning it, she said with an air of superiority. I wanted to argue, but decided it wasn't worth it. I was too exhausted to start a debate. My first day at work had been both exciting and draining. All I wanted was a hot shower and to collapse into bed. As I trudged to the bedroom, hoping for a moment of peace, I heard Patricia's voice behind me. Why are you lying down? She demanded, barging into the room without knocking. Who's going to cook supper? I sat up, startled. We already ate dinner at the restaurant, I explained, my tone a mix of fatigue and frustration. I'm tired, Patricia. I just need to rest. Her eyebrows shot up in disbelief. What kind of dinner is that? Restaurant meals are so tiny, and you can't even tell what they're cooking half the time. Come on, get up. Let's go to the kitchen and make something. Or have you decided to starve your mother-in-law and your husband? I sighed, knowing there was no escaping her insistence. Reluctantly, I got out of bed and followed her to the kitchen. To my surprise, Michael was already there. Patricia must have pulled him into her plans before confronting me. He stood by the counter, peeling potatoes, his eyes occasionally drifting toward the television in the corner. The three of us worked together, though the atmosphere was anything but calm. Patricia took every opportunity to point out how things should be done her way, making both Michael and me feel like amateur chefs in our own home. Then, without warning, Patricia announced, I've decided to stay for an indefinite period of time. I've had a big fight with my husband. So, to show him I'm serious, I've moved in with you and the kids. I won't leave until he apologizes. My heart sank. Knowing my father-in-law's stubborn nature, I realized this situation could drag on for weeks, or even longer. I felt tears prick the corners of my eyes as the weight of her words hit me. This wasn't going to be a short visit. It was the start of something much bigger. All I could do was brace myself for the chaos ahead. I came to the sinking realization that Patricia would be staying with us for a very, very long time. My gut feelings turned out to be correct. Weeks went by, and there was no sign of her leaving or even thinking about returning to her own home. To make matters worse, her husband, Michael's father, seemed to be enjoying his newfound freedom. He showed no interest in reuniting with Patricia, fully embracing the perks of bachelor life. Patricia, on the other hand, seemed to love her new living arrangements. She no longer had to wake up early to cook meals, manage household bills, or do laundry. Instead, she spent her days watching American dramas on television, only pausing to give us instructions about household chores she felt needed to be done. Tasks like cleaning the windows, reorganizing shelves, or even dusting areas that didn't need it became her way of keeping us busy. Michael was starting to reach his breaking point. He would occasionally glance at his mother with a look that was somewhere between frustration and desperation. At one point, he tried to talk to her about the situation. "Mom, don't you think it's time to go back home? This arrangement isn't working for anyone." But Patricia stood her ground, as stubborn as ever. "I told you already, Michael. I'll leave when your father apologizes." End of discussion. Michael and I finally decided to call his father to sort things out. After all, this was a problem only he could fix, or so we thought. When we reached him on the phone, his reaction was anything but helpful. "Are you two out of your minds?" Michael's father said, sounding almost amused. "For the first time in years, I feel alive and free. There's no way I'm taking her back. She's your mother, and now she's your responsibility. By the way, aren't you ashamed of bothering me with this nonsense?" Before we could say anything else, he hung up. Moments later, Michael's attempts to call him back were met with the cold reality of being blocked. His own father had cut off all communication, leaving us to deal with Patricia on our own. Michael was visibly upset. He threw his phone onto the couch in frustration, his face a mixture of disappointment and anger. "I can't believe this," he muttered. "I never thought my marriage would face something like this." I could feel my patience wearing thin, too. Patricia's constant presence in the house, her lack of contribution, and her controlling behavior were becoming unbearable. I had hinted to Michael several times that I was nearing my limit. After all, this was my apartment. Michael had lived with his parents before we got married, and he was still technically registered at their address. Now he understood that if my patience snapped, this situation might escalate in ways he didn't want to imagine. Something had to change, and soon, or the harmony in our home would be shattered entirely. I wouldn't hesitate to kick Michael and his mother out if things didn't improve. But my mother-in-law, Patricia, seemed completely unconcerned about pushing boundaries or upsetting us. Michael realized this too, after a month of her living with us. One evening, we had just returned home from work and were still in the hallway when Patricia walked out of the guest room. Without a word, she approached the dresser, opened it, and pulled out my wallet. My eyes widened in shock as I watched her open it and take out all the cash.
"Mom,
"What do you think you're doing?" "That's my wallet," I exclaimed, unable to contain my anger. She didn't even flinch. "I know it is," she replied, casually flipping through the bills. "Why is there so little money in here?" I was stunned by her audacity. "That's my first salary. Put it back this instant," I demanded. Instead of apologizing, Patricia tucked the cash into her bra and adjusted it, as if daring me to say more. "This is my money," she declared confidently. "And what's the big deal? In our family, we share everything, including money. You should have known this when you married into the family," she added, wagging her finger at me like I was the one in the wrong. I was boiling with rage. "Oh, I'll show you what sharing means," I snapped, storming off. I locked myself in the bathroom to calm down, refusing to join anyone for dinner. When I came out, I went straight to bed without speaking to Michael. By morning, I had a plan. It was time to remind Patricia that she was a guest in our home and that Michael and I had our own family and rules. If she wanted to stay, she needed to respect that. I woke up at dawn to execute my plan. As quietly as I could, I made a few changes around the house. When Michael got up and went into the bathroom, his loud laughter almost ruined everything. "Keep it down," I hissed. "You'll blow my cover." The first part of my plan was subtle, but symbolic. I rearranged the living room to reflect how I wanted things to look. Patricia had been rearranging furniture and decorations to suit her tastes. Then, I took all my personal belongings, including things like my favorite slippers and keepsakes, and locked them away in a cabinet where she couldn't access them. Finally, I removed the guest towels and any extras she might use without asking. It wasn't about being petty, it was about setting boundaries. If she wanted to treat our home as her own, she needed to understand that there were limits. As I watched Michael struggle to suppress his laughter, I couldn't help but smile. This was just the beginning. If Patricia thought she could walk all over us, she was about to learn otherwise. I snapped at Michael, annoyed by his inability to take things seriously, and went back to my task, focusing on the plan that had started forming in my mind. Meanwhile, Patricia seemed utterly unconcerned about anything outside her own comfort. She lay in bed, stretching luxuriously, clearly enjoying the luxurious mattress and soft pillows. It was far better than the bed she had back at her own home, and she wasn't about to give it up anytime soon. The morning was hers to savor. The kids were out working, so there was no rush to get up. She decided she would lie down for a bit longer, take her time with breakfast, and then indulge in another episode of her favorite American drama. Why not? Life was easy here. She didn't have to cook, clean, or pay a single bill. Eventually, she rose from bed, stretching like she had all the time in the world. She did a couple of light exercises, bends and squats, before strolling out of her room. She hummed softly as she made her way to the kitchen, expecting to find breakfast waiting for her. But when she stepped in, the sight before her made her freeze in place. Yellow stickers. Everywhere. The fridge, the microwave, the toaster, the cupboards, everything had a bright yellow sticker on it. Her brows furrowed in confusion as she looked around the room, taking in the bizarre sight. At the kitchen table, I sat casually, sipping juice from a glass. I didn't bother to look up as she stood there, visibly shocked. "Why aren't you at work?" Patricia finally asked, breaking the silence, her voice laced with irritation. "They've allowed me to work from home," I replied coolly, my tone calm and unbothered. Her attention returned to the stickers. She stepped closer to the fridge, grabbed one of the yellow notes with 3 fingers, and peeled it off. Slowly, she read what was written on it. Her face went from confusion to disbelief and then to anger as she processed what it said. "What the hell is this supposed to mean?" she exclaimed, waving the sticker in the air like it was a piece of evidence in a courtroom. I leaned back in my chair, stretching slightly, taking another sip of juice. "Oh, that's," I said, feigning nonchalance. "Those are the prices for services in this house." I sat down and calculated the cost of living here, the food, the utilities, and the use of space for the 3 of us, me, Michael, and you. Patricia's jaw dropped. She blinked at me, clearly struggling to process my words. Finally, she sputtered, "Why is bread so expensive? Are you out of your mind? Charging your own mother for bread?" "Well, excuse me," I replied, shrugging. "You took my entire first salary without even asking. Food doesn't buy itself, and bills don't magically pay themselves either. Someone has to cover the costs." She stared at me in stunned silence before narrowing her eyes. "And does Michael know about this ridiculous stunt?" "Of course he does," I replied firmly. "In this family, we have a rule that everyone contributes to the household expenses. You've been living here for over a month now, so it's only fair that you pay your share. Michael is willing to take on some of your costs because you're his mother, but not all of them. You're an adult, and adults contribute." Patricia's face turned beet red. "The nerve you have," she shouted, her voice shaking with anger. "Charging your own mother-in-law. How dare you? You've turned my son against me." "I haven't turned anyone against you," I said, keeping my tone steady but assertive. "You've been living here as if this were a hotel. That's not how things work in this house. Michael and I work hard to maintain this household, and it's not fair for you to live here without contributing." Patricia stood there, shaking with rage, unable to respond. I could see she was grappling with the reality that her carefree days of lounging in our home were coming to an end. She had crossed too many boundaries, and it was time for her to understand that this wasn't her space to rule over as she pleased. For a moment, she looked like she might explode, but instead, she turned on her heel and stormed out of the kitchen, slamming the door to her room behind her. I leaned back in my chair, feeling a mixture of satisfaction and exhaustion. This wasn't the end of the battle, but it was a step towards setting boundaries and reclaiming my home. "I will never set foot in your house again. You can shove your food where the sun doesn't shine," Patricia screamed, her face as red as a tomato. She furiously tried to rip another sticker off the coffee maker, but when she removed it, another one was waiting right underneath. "Coffee, water, cream, electricity. Yes, everything is itemized and needs to be paid for separately, I said, my tone dripping with mock politeness. I flashed her my sweetest smile, which only seemed to make her angrier. Patricia let out a frustrated growl and stormed off to her room. For a moment, blissful silence filled the apartment. Then, her shrill voice echoed through the walls as she made a phone call. "Hello. Have you lost your wife or something? Because it sure seems like you have," she barked into her phone. "Come and pick me up immediately, do you hear me? Right now. And God help you if you're even a minute late," she added, her tone sharp with fury. It seemed Patricia's husband, who had previously blocked her number, had either forgotten or unblocked her without realizing the consequences. Less than a minute later, she emerged from her room, fully dressed, her suitcase in hand. She stormed into the kitchen, threw some money on the table with dramatic flair, and glared at me. "Here, take your precious money. I'll tell my son everything, you hear me? He doesn't need a wife like you scheming little creature," she snapped, venom dripping from her words. 20 minutes later, her husband arrived. His face was a mix of resignation and amusement as he helped her with her bags. Just as they were about to leave, he paused at the door and turned to me. "How did you manage to pull this off?" he asked, clearly impressed. I smiled, shrugging casually. "Years of dealing with my siblings growing up. They taught me how to handle a stubborn personality," I said with a wink. He chuckled. "Write me a guide, will you? I might need this for future reference," he joked before escorting Patricia out the door. As soon as it closed behind them, I let out a deep sigh of relief and called out loudly, "Michael, where are you?" From the bedroom, Michael appeared, almost crawling on all fours. "Coming, dear," he said sheepishly, his face a mixture of guilt and admiration. "You're incredible, Jessica. I wouldn't have even thought of doing that," he admitted. "To be honest," I replied, "the whole thing was a bit embarrassing. It went further than I wanted, but I just couldn't take it anymore. I love your mom, really, but not when she's living with us." Michael smiled and wrapped an arm around me. "Don't worry about it. She'll survive. She's tough. She'll calm down, think it over, and maybe, just maybe, she'll come back to make amends one day," he reassured me. "I hope so," I said, though part of me wasn't entirely sure. With a deep breath, I let the stress melt away. Then Michael and I burst into laughter, playfully shoving each other as we started peeling off the now unnecessary stickers from every surface in the house. Peace had returned, and we were determined to enjoy every moment of it. Hi everyone, my name is Brenda Strong. I'm a 31-year-old graphic designer working from the comfort of my small home studio in Elizabeth. Today, I want to tell you a story about how my life, which seemed so perfect, suddenly fell apart. Don't worry though, I came out stronger in the end. It all started one morning when my husband, Scott, casually said, "Honey, your mom's coming over for coffee." No heads up, no thought about my busy schedule or the deadlines I had to meet. This was the third time that week she'd popped by unannounced. I muttered something under my breath, trying not to let my irritation show, while staring at the half-finished designs scattered across my desk. Scott, a real estate agent who could close million-dollar deals without breaking a sweat, didn't seem to notice how his mother's constant interference was affecting me. When Scott and I got married 3 years ago, I thought I had it all: a loving husband, a successful design business, and a cozy home office. But there was one big problem. Maria, my mother-in-law, was a nightmare. One day, during one of her uninvited visits, I caught her rearranging my spice cabinet. "Did you touch my spices again?" I asked, trying to keep calm. "Oh, darling," she said in her overly sweet tone that grated on my nerves. "I'm just trying to help. You're always so busy with your little computer drawings." She didn't stop there. At a family dinner, she brought it up again. "So, Scott tells me you're working on a big project," she said, cutting her meat as if she were performing surgery. I was proud of my work and replied, "Yes, it's for a major tech company." But before I could say more, she interrupted, "Speaking of projects, Andrea's daughter is starting a design business. Maybe you could give her some tips." Things took a turn for the worse. when I noticed something odd later that night. My laptop's portfolio tab was open. I never leave it open. Babe, did someone use my computer today? I asked Scott. Mom needed to check her email, he said casually. The next morning, my sister Joyce stormed into my house, holding her phone. Your designs are all over social media, she exclaimed. I grabbed her phone and saw what she meant. Andrea's daughter had posted designs identical to mine just hours before I was supposed to present them to a client. This isn't a coincidence, Joyce said firmly. I was stunned. How could someone steal my work so blatantly? My mind raced as I tried to figure out what to do next. That experience was a turning point for me. It forced me to reevaluate my boundaries and stand up for myself, both personally and professionally. It wasn't easy, but in the end, I grew stronger and more confident in handling difficult situations. This chaos taught me to protect what I've worked so hard to build. I've seen Maria sneaking around her office when you're not there, my sister Joyce told me one evening. That same night, my best friend Evelyn called with more troubling news. Girl, you won't believe what I overheard at the bank, she said. Maria's been asking about your business accounts. My stomach dropped. Things were starting to feel very wrong. The breaking point came when I walked into my office to find it completely turned upside down. My external hard drive was missing, and important files on my computer had been deleted. I was furious and panicked. When I told Scott about it, his response left me speechless. Maybe you just misplaced things, he said casually. You've been really stressed lately. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Are you seriously defending this? I snapped. Before he could answer, his phone buzzed. It was Maria. Coming, Mom, he said, grabbing his keys and leaving me alone in my chaotic office. My hands trembled as I looked around. This wasn't just about annoying visits or meddling with spice cabinets anymore. This was a full-on attack on my business, and Scott didn't seem to care. This has to stop, I whispered to myself. I didn't know it then, but the worst was yet to come. The nightmare was just beginning. Joyce hugged me tightly later that evening. You need to document everything, she said. This isn't normal, Brenda. I nodded, staring at the screen in front of me. There they were, my stolen designs, plastered all over social media by Andrea's daughter. It was like they were mocking me. I'm done playing nice, I said, determination setting in. Then came the day of Maria's surprise dinner party. It started with her usual dramatic flair, an unannounced visit. I'm hosting bridge club here tonight, she declared as if it were her house. Andrea and Cheryl are bringing their husbands. Don't embarrass Scott. I was already swamped with work, rushing to complete my biggest project yet. My client needed the final designs by 9 p.m., and they had to be perfect. I muttered to myself as I darted back and forth between my desk and the kitchen, trying to juggle everything. Then it all fell apart. The smoke alarm blared as the roast I was preparing burned in the oven. Meanwhile, I opened my project folder only to find corrupted files where my finished designs should have been. My heart raced as panic set in. From the dining room, Maria's voice rang out like nails on a chalkboard. Something smells burnt, she called, feigning concern. I clenched my fists, trying to stay calm. Just a small setback. I yelled back, my voice shaking as I tried to salvage what was left of my project. This wasn't just a bad day. It felt like my life was spiraling out of control. Something had to change, and it had to change fast. I couldn't let Maria's games destroy everything I'd worked so hard to build. I tried to save what I could. Dinner was burning, and my file transfer kept failing. My heart sank as I noticed someone was accessing my cloud drive. Who could it be? Before I could figure it out, the doorbell rang again. Andrea and Cheryl arrived with their husbands, all smiles and politeness that felt more fake than real. Still not ready? Andrea smirked, her tone sharp. Cheryl leaned in, pretending to care. Need any help, dear? She asked sweetly, but her words felt like an insult. My phone buzzed. It was another message from my client. Where are the designs? They asked. Just 20 more minutes, I whispered to myself, trying not to lose it. And then, everything fell apart. A sharp slap rang out in the kitchen, shocking me to my core. Maria had hit me. 20 minutes, she sneered. My friends are waiting. The room spun as Andrea pulled out her phone, recording the chaos like it was entertainment. "Mom, calm down." Scott finally stepped in, but Maria wouldn't have it. "Don't you dare tell me to calm down," she shouted. Then, turning to me, she said, "You're ruining this family's reputation." Tears welled up in my eyes as I touched my stinging cheek. "She's just stressed," Scott whispered to me later, as if that excused her behavior. "You know how important these dinners are." The final blow came when my phone buzzed again. It was my client. The contract was terminated. I couldn't hold back the tears anymore. Locking myself in my office, I tried to open my design folders, but everything was gone. Completely wiped out. Scott knocked softly on the door. "You should apologize to Mom," he said. "Apologize?" I whispered, anger and disbelief cutting through my pain. "Are you kidding me?" "She's crying downstairs," he continued, as if that was supposed to make me feel guilty. "Andrea and Cheryl are comforting her." My anger boiled over. Ignoring him, I reopened my laptop and my heart sank. My designs were already posted on Andrea's daughter's business page. She had stolen my work, and there was nothing I could do. Just then, Joyce burst into my office holding a small, worn book. "I found something," she said, breathless. "You need to see this." It was Maria's old diary, hidden among the mess she had created in my office. Joyce pointed to an entry from 6 years ago. My hands shook as I read it. Finally got rid of that gold digger. A few well-placed rumors, some financial sabotage, and she's out of the picture. No one ruins my son's future except who I choose. "This isn't just about tonight," Joyce whispered, her voice filled with anger. "She's done this before. And Scott? He's as much a victim as you are, but that doesn't excuse him." I stared at the diary, my mind racing. It all made sense now, but I wasn't sure what to do next. One thing was certain. I couldn't let Maria destroy my life any further. I stared at my reflection in the dark screen of my laptop, my cheeks still stinging from the slap. "This ends now," I said softly but firmly. I had had enough of Maria's games, and it was time to take control. For the next week, I played the role of the broken and defeated wife. I let Maria think she had won, watching her smug expression as she basked in her supposed victory. She had no idea I was setting her up. During Wednesday dinner, I decided to bait her. "I think I need therapy," I said with a sniffle. "Maybe I'm just not good enough for this family." Maria's smile was as sweet as poison. "Oh, darling, we all have our limitations," she said, her voice dripping with fake kindness. Andrea and Cheryl exchanged smug glances, clearly enjoying my downfall. That night, I left my laptop open on purpose, displaying a folder labeled "New Designs Confidential" in bold, attention-grabbing text. What Maria didn't know was that I had installed hidden cameras in my office. Sure enough, the footage captured her sneaking into my office at midnight, copying files from my laptop. "Got you," I whispered as I reviewed the video the next morning. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Evelyn at the bank. "Maria tried to access your business accounts again. We flagged it," she wrote. Minutes later, I got another message from Joyce. "Found the connection. Maria owes money to Edward, the shark, Martinez. Big time." Later, I met Scott's sister Isabella at a quiet cafe. She looked nervous, but eventually spoke up. "There's something you should know about Mom," she said. "Remember Madison, the church treasurer who moved away?" "What about her?" I asked, curious. She didn't move. Madison found discrepancies in the church accounts. Mom made sure she was discredited, Isabella revealed. Everything was starting to make sense. Maria's manipulation wasn't new. She had done this before. The perfect moment came during a church fundraiser. Maria stood at the podium, soaking up attention. "Such generous donations," she said proudly. "Especially from our anonymous benefactor." "Funny you should mention that," I said, standing up. The room went silent. "The bank has some questions about those donations." Maria's face twitched. "This isn't the time," she said, her voice strained. "It's never the time, is it?" I shot back. Just like it wasn't the time when Madison found the missing money. The air was thick with tension. "How dare you?" Andrea snapped, rushing to defend Maria. Show them the transfers, Maria, I challenged. Show them where the money really went. Cheryl grabbed her purse, looking ready to flee. Maria lunged toward me, but Isabella stepped in between us. Enough, Mom, Isabella said firmly, her voice steady. Maria froze, her mask of control slipping. For the first time, it felt like the truth was winning, and Maria's reign of manipulation was crumbling. I found your gambling receipts, I said, holding up the evidence. Scott froze, his perfect image of a happy family shattering before my eyes. Baby, she's lying, Maria cried out, turning to him with desperation. Your wife is trying to destroy us. My phone buzzed and I glanced at the screen. A message popped up. The startup using your stolen designs just got served a cease and desist order. Smiling, I turned to Maria. Check your phone, Maria, I said calmly. Andrea's daughter is looking for you. Maria's face went pale as she read the message. You set me up, she hissed, her voice full of venom. No, I replied firmly. You did this to yourself. Every file you stole was watermarked. Every secret conversation was recorded. Every shady bank transfer was tracked. Isabella stepped forward and stood beside me. The church board wants to see you, Mom, she said firmly. Now. Scott, do something. Maria screamed, panic evident in her voice. But Scott just stood there, frozen, as the truth about his mother finally sank in. For once, he couldn't deny what was happening. Meeting someone later? I asked, pretending to be innocent. Maybe Edward Martinez? At the mention of the loan shark's name, Maria's eyes widened in fear. Whispers rippled through the crowd, and the carefully crafted mask she wore began to crumble. This isn't over, she hissed, grabbing her designer bag and trying to maintain her dignity. Actually, it is, I said coolly. The FBI is very interested in those offshore accounts you've been using. Maria stormed out, her world falling apart around her. As she left, I caught sight of Andrea and Cheryl trying to slip away unnoticed. Don't forget your recordings, I called out after them. The ones you edited to make me look crazy? I have the originals. Andrea and Cheryl froze in their tracks, their faces filled with guilt. Moments later, I watched as they were led out of the church hall in handcuffs. Justice at last. The room emptied, leaving Scott standing alone. Brenda, he began, his voice shaky and uncertain. I raised my hand to stop him. Save it, I said firmly. The divorce papers are on your desk. 1 year later, I stood at the podium, accepting the award for Most Innovative Agency of 2023 at the Digital Design Awards. The applause filled the room, a symbol of how far I had come. My business was thriving, and my life was finally my own. As I stepped off the stage, my assistant leaned in and whispered, "Your security system detected movement at the back entrance." I nodded, a calm smile on my face. Whatever was coming, I was ready. I had rebuilt my life, and nothing would bring me down again. I glanced at the surveillance feed on my office screen. Maria, who once flaunted her designer outfits, now wore a worn waitress uniform. She was arguing with the security guard at the building entrance. "Ma'am, you're not on the list," the guard said firmly. "But that's my daughter-in-law," Maria pleaded. "Ex-daughter-in-law," I murmured to myself, watching her desperation play out on the screen. My phone buzzed with a text from Joyce. "Turn on Channel 8. I grabbed the remote and switched on the news. Breaking news flashed across the screen, showing Andrea and Cheryl being escorted from their homes in handcuffs. "The suspects are charged with multiple counts of fraud and conspiracy," the news anchor reported. Another message buzzed on my phone. This one was from Scott. "Can we talk? I've been in therapy. I understand everything now." I stared at the screen for a moment before deleting the message. It was too late for apologies. At the after-party for the awards ceremony, a young designer approached me. "Miss Strong," she asked nervously, "is it true about Maria Thompson's gambling?" "Old news," I replied, taking a sip of champagne. "Focus on your designs." Isabella joined me a few minutes later, looking elegant and confident in her new business attire. "Mom's working at Denny's now," she said casually. She tried getting help from her old church friends, but most of them are either in jail or pretending they never knew her. I smiled. What about the loan sharks? They took everything, Isabella replied. Even her precious china collection. My phone buzzed again, this time a message from Evelyn at the bank. Maria tried to open a new account today. Denied. She's on every fraud watch list. Later that night, I was alone in my office when I opened an email from Scott's lawyer. Final divorce settlement ready for signature. Without a second thought, I clicked approve. Just as I was getting ready to leave, my security system pinged again. Maria was sitting in a beat-up car outside the building. Should we call the police? My assistant asked. No need, I replied. She can't hurt me anymore. I gathered my awards and designs, turned off the lights, and walked out the front entrance. Maria's car was still parked outside, but I didn't even glance her way. She was part of my past, and I was done letting her control any part of my life. Some people might call it karma, but I call it justice. As I stepped into my car, my phone buzzed one last time, a notification that Maria's latest loan shark victim story had gone viral. I smiled, deleted it, and drove away, ready to embrace my new life. The weight of the past was finally gone, and for the first time in years, I felt completely free. I often reflect on a question that lingers in my mind. Was I too harsh by refusing Scott's apology? He grew up under Maria's control, and it's clear now that he was a victim of her manipulation too. Breaking free from toxic family patterns and generational trauma is no small task. Some might say that when someone shows genuine growth, they deserve a second chance. But in the end, I chose to focus on my peace and my own success over reconciliation. It wasn't an easy choice, but it felt like the right one for me. What would you have done in my position? Could you forgive someone who had enabled years of gaslighting and emotional pain, even if they finally realized the damage they caused? Or do some bridges, once burned, deserve to stay that way? It's a tough decision, one that many people face in their lives. I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to choose between forgiveness and protecting yourself? How did it turn out for you? Was it worth it to forgive, or was walking away the best thing you could have done for yourself? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. I think this is a conversation we all can learn from. For me, walking away wasn't about holding on to anger or resentment. It was about making a decision to prioritize my well-being. After everything I went through, I knew I had to set boundaries and move forward without looking back. That decision didn't come from a place of hate. It came from a place of self-respect. If my story resonates with you, consider giving this a like or subscribing for more real-life stories about standing up to toxic people and learning to choose yourself. Sometimes, the strongest thing we can do isn't fighting back or trying to fix the situation. Sometimes, the strongest thing is knowing when to walk away and never look back. I'm Melissa, and I've been a doctor for almost as long as I've been Tyler's wife. We've had our ups and downs, but those 34 years went by so fast. Our home was big and cozy, always filled with life, especially when the boys, Ronald and Steven, were young. They were like night and day, but each brought their own kind of joy into our lives. Tyler and I, both doctors, worked hard to build a comfortable life. We even bought a few apartments over the years to rent out for extra income. Life seemed to be going well until one day, Tyler came home looking unusually serious. "Melissa, we need to talk," he said, his voice heavy. He had some tests done, and the results came back it was cancer. The months that followed were filled with hospital visits, treatments, and endless waiting. Tyler fought hard, but the cancer was relentless. Watching the strongest man, I knew fade away was heartbreaking. No amount of medical training could prepare me for that. One evening, as we sat quietly in the living room, Tyler took my hand and said, "Melissa, if things don't go our way, make sure everything is sorted with the boys. The will is done, and you'll be fine financially." Not long after, he passed away. The funeral was a somber event, with family, friends, and colleagues coming from all over to pay their respects. But the hardest part was the quiet at home after everyone left. The empty spaces where Tyler used to be, his things still in place it hurt to see and remember. A few days after the funeral, I was in the kitchen, trying to figure out what to do with the leftover food, when Ronald stormed in, his face full of worry and anger. Stephen followed, looking like he wished he was anywhere else. "Mom, we need to talk about Dad's will," Ronald said, getting straight to the point as he always did. I sighed and set down the cling film. "Yes, I know," I said. "Your father left everything to me. He wanted to make sure I was taken care of." Ronald slammed his hand on the counter and said, "But what about me and Stephen? We're his sons. It's not fair that we get nothing." Stephen tried to calm things down. "Ronald, let's not rush into this. Mom's still grieving. We can figure this out without fighting." Ronald glared at him and said, "Easy for you to say. You're not thinking about the future like I am." I leaned against the counter, feeling the weight of their stares. "Your father and I built this together. He trusted me to handle things, but I hear you, Ronald. It's not my plan to leave you out. So, what then?" Ronald asked, crossing his arms and raising his voice. "We just wait until you decide it's the right time to give us our share?" "Ronald, watch your tone." I snapped, losing my patience. "I'm still your mother." Stephen stepped between us, holding up his hands like a referee. "Both of you, please. This isn't helping. Mom, maybe there's a middle ground here." I nodded, rubbing my temples. "Okay, here's what we can do. The apartment's your father, and I invested in the ones downtown." Ronald interrupted. "Yes, those." I gave him a look to quiet down and continued. "I was thinking you each take one. They're yours to live in or rent out. And from the savings, let's say $280,000 each to help you get started on whatever you need." Ronald bit his lip, clearly doing the math in his head. "And the rest? The house, the money? That stays with me for now," I said firmly. "When I'm gone, it'll come to you. These were your father's wishes." Ronald looked like he wanted to argue more, but Stephen nudged him. "Let's think about this, man. It's a fair start. Mom's not leaving us with nothing." Ronald finally nodded, though he wasn't happy about it. "Fine, but I want this in writing, Mom. No more surprises." "Of course," I agreed. "We'll get everything documented properly." As they left the kitchen, I heard Stephen quietly say to Ronald, "Give her a break, will you? She's doing her best." Ronald muttered something under his breath that I didn't catch, and honestly, I didn't want to. As I washed the dishes, I wondered if Tyler could see us and what he'd think. I hoped I was doing the right thing, but only time would tell. And time, that tricky thing, wasn't always on our side. It was a sunny afternoon, the kind that makes everything feel okay, when Ronald brought Shirley over to meet me for the first time. They hadn't been dating long, but Ronald was already head over heels. You could tell by the way he was fussing over her, which wasn't like him at all. They walked in, and right away, Shirley had this confident attitude, like she owned the place. Dressed to impress, she swept into my living room with barely a hello, her eyes quickly scanning everything. "Nice place you've got here," she said, flipping her hair back as she sat down without waiting for an invitation. Ronald was grinning like a fool beside her. I forced a smile, trying to be a good host. "Thank you, Shirley. Can I get you anything? Coffee, tea?" "Coffee sounds lovely," she replied, then turned to Ronald. "Babe, make sure it's black, no sugar." Ronald nodded and headed to the kitchen, leaving me alone with her in my own living room, feeling like the guest. The silence was awkward until she broke it. "So, Ronald tells me you're pretty well off," she said, eyeing the decor. "I'm used to a certain standard, you know. My parents made sure of that." "That's good to hear," I said, not sure what else to add. Ronald came back with the coffee and handed Shirley her cup. She took a sip and made a face. It's all right. Anyway, we've been discussing our future together, planning ahead, you know." "That's wise," I said, glancing at Ronald, hoping he'd give me some clue about where this conversation was going. Shirley set her cup down. "Yeah, and speaking of planning, we were thinking about the wedding. You know, I want something special. Ronald has probably told you I saw this place perfect for a rehearsal dinner, but it's a bit pricey. It's about $45,000. I nearly choked on my coffee. $45,000 just for the rehearsal dinner? Ronald quickly jumped in. "Mom, it's important to Christina. We want to start things off right. I put my cup down, feeling a storm brewing inside. Look, that's a lot of money for dinner, Shirley. We need to be reasonable. Shirley's face hardened. Reasonable? Ronald says you have the money. I don't see why we should compromise on something that important. Ronald was nodding along with her, but I could see the unease in his eyes. He knew he was asking for too much. I'm all for celebrating, I said, trying to keep my voice calm, but $45,000 is just too much. I can't justify that. Shirley stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. I'm not used to compromising on my standards, Melissa. I made it clear to Ronald that I expect a certain lifestyle. Ronald tried to smooth things over. Mom, maybe we can find a middle ground. There's no middle ground on $45,000 for a dinner, Ronald. That's final. I snapped, losing my patience. Shirley grabbed her purse and glared at me. Fine, if that's how it's going to be, then maybe we need to rethink some things. They left soon after, and I sat there, reeling from the encounter. The nerve of that girl, coming into my home, drinking my coffee, and telling me how to spend my money. It felt like a slap in the face, a wake-up call I wasn't ready for. I was out at the grocery store when Ronald and Shirley decided to drop by again. By the time I got home, Stephen was awkwardly trying to entertain them in the living room. The atmosphere was tense, the kind that makes you want to turn around and leave, but it was my house, so I braced myself and walked in. Shirley, all dressed up as usual, handed me a list as soon as I set down my grocery bags. Melissa, we thought a lot about the wedding gifts, and here's what we've settled on. I hope this will be easier for you to handle. I skimmed the list she handed me. It was surprisingly reasonable: kitchen appliances, some nice US, even a couple of pieces of furniture. This seems quite reasonable, I said, feeling a moment of relief. I think these are wonderful choices, really. Ronald looked at Shirley, hope crossing his face. But just as I was about to discuss where we could buy these items, Shirley's expression changed abruptly. She gasped, "Oh no, this isn't right. Give that back." She snatched the list from my hands and rummaged through her purse, pulling out another sheet of paper. Here's the actual list. This new list was nothing like the first. It included an apartment, a luxury new car, an exclusive vacation, and even diamond jewelry. My jaw dropped. Is this some kind of joke? Shirley didn't flinch. No joke, Melissa. These are the gifts we expect, only the best for our wedding. I stared at her, then at Ronald, waiting for him to say something, anything to suggest he didn't agree with this madness. But he just stood there, looking between us, clearly conflicted but silent. I couldn't hold back. Ronald, why are you letting her do this? You know this is unreasonable. Shirley cut in, her voice rising. This doesn't concern you, Melissa. You just need to pay up and keep quiet. That's when Stephen stood up, his face set hard. That's enough, Shirley. You're not going to talk to our mom like that. This is her house, and you're way out of line. You need to leave, now. The room was thick with tension as Ronald and Shirley gathered their things. Shirley muttered under her breath, clearly angry. This is ridiculous. We'll remember this. They left, and the door slammed shut behind them. I sat down, feeling the weight of what had just happened. I felt the weight of the whole situation pressing down on me. Stephen sat beside me, putting an arm around my shoulders. We'll figure this out, Mom, but you can't let them push you into giving more than you can or should. It's not right. He was right, of course, but as I sat there with my son, I couldn't help but worry about Ronald. How had things gotten so out of hand? How could he not see what this was doing to our family? The silence between us was filled with unspoken worries and fears for the future. I knew then that this was far from over. It was only going to get harder from here. The weeks that followed were filled with constant phone calls from Ronald. Each one was more demanding than the last, his tone desperate, almost frantic. Mom, you don't understand. I can't look poor next to Christina's family, he'd argue, his voice cracking with stress. You have the money. Why can't you just help me out here? I sat at the kitchen table, phone pressed to my ear, feeling a knot in my stomach. Ronald, it's not about the money. It's about living within your means. Christina's expectations, you can't keep up with that without going into serious debt. He'd scoff, his frustration boiling over. What do you know about it? I'm not going to live like a... I need more from the inheritance now. Ronald, I've offered to cover half the wedding costs, up to $130,000, and give a $7,000 gift. That's more than generous. But everything has to be agreed upon with me, no surprises. There was a pause, then a sharp laugh from him. That's nothing. You're just being stingy. You have $1 million sitting there. Why are you holding out on me? Because it's not just about the money, I replied, my patience wearing thin. It's about not feeding into this fantasy that's going to ruin you. He yelled, loud enough that I had to pull the phone away from my ear. I don't need this. I'll handle it my way. Forget you. And just like that, the call ended. Months passed in silence. I tried to busy myself with daily routines, trying not to worry about Ronald. But the peace was short-lived. The phone rang one afternoon, and it was my sister-in-law, Rachel. Melissa, I thought you should know. Rachel's voice was hesitant, careful. Ronald is flying all the wedding guests to Miami Beach. He sold his apartment to fund it, and he expects you to get there on your own. He mentioned you weren't interested in helping. I hung up, a mix of anger and sorrow churning inside me. How could he be so reckless? Before I could process it all, Stephen came into the room, his expression grim. Mom, there's something you need to hear. I recorded their conversation when they were sitting here in the living room, Stephen said as he handed me an audio recorder. I pressed play and Ronald and Shirley's voices filled the kitchen. Ronald, your mom is just a nasty old woman with a fat wallet. We need to squeeze as much as we can out of her and then cut her off, Shirley said. Ronald responded in a cold, agreeable tone. Whatever it takes, Christina. I'm not going to let her control us. If it comes down to it, I'll kick her out in her underwear. I turned off the recorder, my hands trembling, hearing my own son speak about me like that was too much. The room spun as I tried to grasp the depth of his betrayal. Flying to Miami Beach was a decision I didn't take lightly. Stephen was by my side, both of us tense, but determined to face whatever awaited us. When we landed and approached the venue, I was shocked by the sheer luxury of it all, flowers everywhere, lights strung like stars across the evening sky, and music in the air. As we walked into the gathering, I spotted Ronald and Shirley mingling with guests. They looked like the perfect couple, all smiles and laughter. My heart ached to see my son so lost in this fake paradise. Before I could take another step toward them, Shirley spotted us. Her smile vanished, replaced by a scowl as she marched over, her high heels clicking angrily on the stone pathway. You shouldn't be here, she hissed, stopping just inches from me, her voice loud enough to draw attention. This is my day, and you're not welcome. I was stunned, but before I could respond, her parents, who had overheard, came over. Her father, a tall, stern-looking man, spoke first. Shirley, that is no way to speak to your guest, much less to Ronald's mother. His tone was harsh, a reprimand that made her cheeks flush with embarrassment. Her mother, looking equally appalled, turned to me with an apologetic smile. Melissa, please come with us. Let's find you a place to sit. They guided us to a table at the edge of the setup, clearly an afterthought with no proper setting. The ceremony started soon after, with speeches that felt hollow given the tension in the air. Then, unexpectedly, I was handed the microphone. I stood, my legs shaky, but my resolve firm. I came here today to wish my son and his new wife a happy future. I began, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. But I also believe in honesty and integrity, something that has been sorely missing from the events leading up to this day. Shirley's face turned from pink to red, her eyes glaring daggers at me. I was asked for money time and again in amounts that no reasonable person would find justifiable. I continued, my words hanging in the air like a final judgment. When I couldn't meet their demands, I was threatened with being cut off from my family and future grandchildren. My voice cracked a bit, but I kept going. Seeing my distress, Stephen stepped closer and placed a supportive hand on my shoulder. I nodded at him and then played the audio recording he had made. Shirley's voice filled the air, cold and calculating, as she talked about how they would squeeze more money out of me. Ronald's voice agreed, saying he was ready to leave me with nothing for the sake of his bride. The crowd murmured, shocked and disapproving. I turned off the recorder, and the silence was heavy. I gave my son an apartment and $35,000, but it was never enough, I said. Today, I'm making it clear. I won't be treated like an ATM or threatened anymore. I'm done with Ronald and Shirley. I wish them well, but from this day forward, I'm choosing to remove myself from their lives. The reaction was immediate. Shirley screamed, her voice shrill and wild. You've ruined my wedding. I curse you. After everything that had happened, coming back home was bittersweet. In the quiet, I made a decision that even surprised me. I quit my job. I had spent years healing others as a doctor, but now it was time to heal myself and rebuild the life that recent events had scattered. Stephen, bless his heart, had just graduated from art college and was full of ideas and ambition. With the $35,000 I had given him, he opened his own tattoo parlor. It wasn't just any shop, it quickly became a place where art and skin came together in stunning displays. Stephen poured his soul into his work, and it paid off. He started entering tattoo contests, and soon his name was on everyone's lips in the area. Before we knew it, he was opening more locations, creating a network of salons that became a hotspot for tattoo enthusiasts. I'd watch him sketch late into the night, his dedication a stark contrast to the chaos his brother had chosen. You're doing amazing, Ollie, I'd say, pride swelling in my chest. During these calm months, Ronald reappeared. One afternoon, he showed up at the door, his eyes tired, his shoulders slumped, so different from the ambitious, sharp man he once was. Mom, I need to talk, he said, not waiting for an invitation to sit. His voice was weary, a far cry from the demanding tone I had gotten used to. I sighed, motioning for him to continue. What is it, Ronald? It's Christina, he said. She's driving me insane. She wants more and more. Nothing's ever enough. I got a second job, but it's still not enough for her. His words were desperate, but they couldn't erase the past so easily. Ronald, I warned you, I said. I told you that living like that, with someone like her, is unsustainable. He rubbed his face, frustration clear. I know you did, Ronald said, his voice trailing off, hopelessness replacing any explanation. Thought what? That money would just appear, because you wanted it to? My tone was harsh, years of built-up frustration making it hard to soften. Look at your brother. He started with the same amount and made something of himself without stepping on others. Ronald bristled. Yeah, well, not everyone's like Stephen, are they? I have rights to the inheritance too, remember? And when you're gone, it'll come to me. That was the last straw. Get out, Ronald, I said, my voice cold and firm. And don't come back, not this time. You chose your path. His jaw tightened, and for a moment, I thought he might argue more. But then he turned and walked out, the door slamming shut behind him. As I stood in the silence that followed, Stephen came downstairs, having heard the last part of our exchange. Are you okay, Mom? He asked. I nodded, wrapping my arms around him. I am now, thanks to you. Let's just focus on the good we can do and the life we can build. He hugged me back, his presence a comforting assurance that not all was lost. In that moment, I knew that despite the heartaches, the journey was still worth it. We had each other, and that was enough to keep moving forward. After the storm with Ronald had passed, our home settled into a calm I hadn't felt in years. It was during this quiet time that Stephen brought someone special home. Her name was Nicole, and she was everything Shirley wasn't: kind, humble, and genuinely caring. As the weeks turned into months, their relationship grew stronger, and soon they announced their engagement. The wedding, unlike the extravagant affair that was Ronald's, was a simple, heartfelt ceremony in our backyard. Flowers from the garden, homemade decorations, and a small group of close friends and family made the day perfect. During the reception, I pulled Stephen aside. You've chosen a wonderful woman, I said, my voice thick with emotion. He squeezed my hand. I learned from the best, he replied, giving me a knowing look. Life moved quickly after that. They sold the apartment I had given Stephen and, with a bit of their savings, bought a small, cozy house just a few miles away. One sunny afternoon, while we were having tea in their new living room, Nicole shared some news. Melissa, "We're expecting twins," she announced, her eyes shining with excitement. I almost dropped my cup, overwhelmed with joy. "Twins? Oh my goodness, that's wonderful." Stephen beamed with pride. "We wanted you to be the first to know. We're really happy, Mom." "Twins," I repeated, letting the words sink in. Grandchildren, it was a new chapter, one I was eager to begin. As for Ronald, news from him was scarce. The last I heard, he had divorced Shirley. She had taken nearly everything in the split, leaving him to start over in another city. Despite the pain he had caused, it hurt to know he was out there somewhere, struggling because of his choices. One evening, as I sat looking through old photo albums, Stephen came and sat beside me. He noticed a picture of Ronald and me from years ago. "Do you ever hear from him?" he asked softly. I shook my head. "No. After everything, he's chosen his path, and I have to respect that, even if it breaks my heart." Stephen put an arm around me. "He's still my brother, Mom. Maybe one day he'll come around." "Maybe," I agreed, though I wasn't sure if I believed it. "But for now, we have plenty to keep us busy, especially with those twins on the way." Stephen chuckled. "Yeah, you're about to be the busiest grandma in town." We both laughed, the sound filling the room with warmth. Despite the past, despite the mistakes and heartaches, this moment here with Stephen felt like everything was exactly as it should be. Life was moving on, and so were we, with new hopes and dreams just on the horizon. My greedy mother-in-law tried to take my car by force. When I stopped her, she hit me hard with a chair stick. I fell to the floor, shocked and in pain. My husband just stood there, watching silently. I felt anger and deep betrayal. That night, I made a decision. I packed my bags, left the house, and decided to take back control of my life and fight for justice. The next morning, they woke up to a shocking surprise they never expected. My name is Lauren. I'm 31 years old and work as a business consultant in Atlanta, Georgia. On the outside, my life looked perfect. I had a great career, earning $3,000 a month, and lived in a nice home with my husband, Brian. To others, we seemed like a successful young couple building a life together. But behind closed doors, things were far from perfect. My marriage was falling apart. Brian lost his job 7 months ago, and while I was okay supporting us at first, everything changed. Instead of being thankful, Brian became distant and spent more time away from home. Meanwhile, his controlling mother, Olivia, became a constant presence in our lives. Her influence was toxic, and she had no limits to her demands. Olivia didn't see my income as mine. She treated it like it was hers, always coming up with family needs to take my money. My financial success, which should have been a source of pride, became the target of her greed. From the outside, no one could see the chaos in my home. I had worked hard to build my consulting business, earn respect, and create a stable life. But none of that seemed to matter to the people closest to me. The tension in my house was unbearable, and I felt completely alone. I knew I had to take charge, but at the time, I didn't know how. I didn't realize how bad things would get before I took back control of my life. The image of a perfect life was falling apart, and so was my patience with the people taking advantage of me. 6 years ago, I met Brian at a corporate networking event. The room was buzzing with energy as professionals mingled, shared ideas, and talked about their goals. Brian stood out with his charming smile and confident personality. We started talking, and I immediately felt a connection. He spoke passionately about his career goals and dreams of traveling the world and living a life full of adventure. It felt like fate. We started dating soon after and quickly became inseparable. Brian seemed perfect, ambitious, supportive, and kind. We dreamed of building great careers and creating a future together. For 3 years, everything seemed to fall into place, and I thought I had found my forever partner. 4 years ago, we got married. Our wedding was a beautiful celebration with family and friends. At the time, I was sure that love and ambition would get us through anything. I felt unstoppable with Brian by my side, ready to take on the world as a team. In the beginning of our marriage, we supported each other. I encouraged Brian in his career, and he cheered me on as I grew my consulting business. We celebrated every little win, like landing new clients or reaching personal goals. I truly believed we had an unbreakable bond. But over time, cracks began to show. 7 months ago, Brian lost his job. I reassured him it was only temporary and took on the financial responsibility without hesitation. I believed in him and thought he'd bounce back. After all, I had built my own career from scratch and knew how hard work could pay off. What I didn't expect was how much Brian would change. He became distant and detached, and the dreams we had shared began to feel like they were slipping away. Instead of coming together during a tough time, we drifted apart, leaving me to handle everything on my own. That's when Brian's mother, Olivia, stepped in. At first, I thought she was just trying to help while Brian was out of work. But it soon became clear that her involvement wasn't about support, it was about control. Olivia, in her late 60s, had a strong, demanding personality. She started visiting more and more, often without warning, and interfered in every part of our lives. What began as occasional advice turned into constant criticism. She judged everything, including how I ran my household. Her presence became overwhelming, and instead of feeling supported, I felt trapped and suffocated. Olivia started controlling everything, even how I spent my money and the clothes I wore. Then came the demands. At first, it seemed harmless. One evening, she said, "Lauren, I've been so stressed lately. A spa retreat would really help. You don't mind helping out, do you? We're family." Brian urged me to agree, saying it would make her happy. I reluctantly said yes, thinking it was a one-time favor. I was wrong. Her requests quickly escalated. She wanted designer clothes, extravagant parties, and even vacations for her friends. She always made it seem like it was my duty, saying things like, "You're doing so well, Lauren. Surely you can spare a little for family." I try to set boundaries. I explained that I was already paying for everything, our mortgage, utilities, groceries, and couldn't afford her indulgences. But Olivia brushed off my concerns, calling me selfish. "What's the point of success if you can't share it with family?" she'd say, glaring at me. Brian stayed silent, avoiding conflict and trying to play the peacemaker. His lack of support only made Olivia bolder, leaving me to deal with her alone. It wasn't just about the money. What hurt most was realizing that Brian didn't have my back. The partnership I thought we had was falling apart. I felt completely alone in my own home. One evening, Olivia made another outrageous request, a luxurious vacation for her friends. That was my breaking point. I sat down with her and Brian and calmly said, "Olivia, I'm happy to help when it's truly necessary, but I can't keep paying for non-essential things. I've worked hard to build my business, and I need to focus on our household expenses." I kept my tone firm but respectful. Her response was sharp and immediate. "You're being selfish, Lauren," she snapped. "After all I've done for this family, this is how you treat me? You don't understand the value of family." I turned to Brian, hoping he'd back me up, but he just shrugged and avoided eye contact. His indifference stung more than Olivia's words. Over the next few weeks, Olivia doubled down on the guilt. She'd say things like, "It's a shame when family doesn't look out for each other," or "Money changes people. It makes them forget their roots." No matter how clear I was about my boundaries, she kept testing me. One evening, she made a shocking suggestion. In her usual casual tone, she said something that left me speechless. "I need a car to get around, and yours is nice. Why don't you just let me have it?" "You can always buy another one," Olivia said casually. I stared at her, shocked. My car wasn't just a vehicle, it was critical for my work and daily life. "I can't do that," I replied, trying to stay calm. "I need my car for my business." Her expression darkened. "You're just proving how selfish you are," she hissed. "You don't deserve the success you have." Her words hurt, but what hurt even more was Brian's silence. Once again, I was left alone, fighting a battle I shouldn't have to face. Olivia's demand for my car was a new low. Her boldness seemed to have no limits, and I was done letting her push me around. Still, I tried to keep my cool. Olivia, I said firmly, I've explained that my car is essential for my work. I can't give it away. Her response was immediate and explosive. You're being selfish, she shouted. After everything I've done for this family, you can't even give me a car? You don't deserve the life you have. I turned to Brian, desperate for support. Do you have anything to say about this? I asked, my voice shaking with frustration. Brian shifted uncomfortably in his seat, avoiding my gaze. Let's not make this a big deal, he muttered. His indifference cut through me like a knife. Before I could say another word, Olivia's anger boiled over. She stood abruptly, scanning the room. Her eyes landed on a chair leaning against the wall, a leftover from Brian's childhood. Without hesitation, she grabbed it and swung it at me with full force. The stick hit the side of my head, and pain shot through me like fire. I stumbled backward, clutching my head as tears filled my eyes. What is wrong with you? I gasped, struggling to steady myself. You ungrateful brat, she screamed. You think you can keep everything for yourself? You don't belong in this family. I looked at Brian, silently begging him to step in, to defend me, to show he cared. But he stood frozen, watching the chaos like a spectator at a show. In that moment, something inside me broke. I realized the man I had married was no longer my partner. He was enabling the abuse I was enduring. That night, I made up my mind. While Brian was out with friends, I packed my bags, ignoring the pounding pain in my head. It was time to take back my life. I left the house with tears streaming down my face and drove straight to my parents' home. I knew I could never go back. It was time to take my life back. When I arrived, my mother immediately knew something was wrong. Her eyes widened in shock when she saw the swelling on my head. Lauren, what happened? She asked, her voice trembling. I broke down and told them everything. Olivia's growing demands, the attack with the chair, and Brian's refusal to defend me. My parents were furious and heartbroken. You need to see a doctor, my father said firmly. This isn't just family drama. This is assault. The next morning, I went to the doctor. They examined the injury and confirmed it was consistent with blunt force trauma. The medical report and photos of the bruise became the first pieces of evidence I'd use to hold Olivia accountable. I also contacted a lawyer, Rachel Green, who came highly recommended for her sharp mind and kind approach. Sitting across from her in her office, I told her my story. She listened carefully, her face showing both empathy and determination. Lauren, Rachel said, this isn't just about divorce. What Olivia did is a crime, and she needs to be held accountable. Brian's failure to act only strengthens your case. She advised me to collect all possible evidence, receipts showing Olivia's financial exploitation, text messages of her demands, and anything else that documented the emotional and physical abuse I had faced. With her guidance, I started putting together a full picture of the toxic environment I had endured for years. For the first time in months, I felt strong. I wasn't just reacting to Olivia and Brian anymore, I was taking charge. The pain from the assault was still there, but so was my determination. This wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming my dignity and independence and making sure they couldn't hurt me or anyone else again. A few days later, while I was organizing evidence with Rachel's help, my mother called me from the living room. Her voice was hesitant. Lauren, Brian, and Olivia are here. They want to talk to you. I felt a wave of anger, but also a sense of calm determination. I wasn't going to let them manipulate me again. Taking a deep breath, I stepped into the living room. Brian looked uncomfortable, avoiding eye contact. Olivia had a faintly remorseful look, but it didn't seem genuine. Lauren, Brian began, his voice low and hesitant. We're here to apologize. Mom knows she went too far. Olivia nodded, her tone syrupy and insincere. Olivia clasped her hands dramatically. I was under a lot of stress, Lauren, she said. I shouldn't have acted that way, but we're family. Let's put this behind us and move on. I crossed my arms, keeping my voice calm but firm. You might be able to move past the fact that you physically attacked me, Olivia, or that you did nothing to stop it, Brian. But do you really think an apology can fix what you've done? Brian's desperation started to show. "Please, Lauren," he said, his voice shaking. "Let's not make this worse. What do you want? We'll do anything to make it right." Their sudden willingness to negotiate gave me an idea. If they were serious, I'd make sure their actions had real consequences, not just empty apologies. "If you're serious," I said, meeting Brian's eyes, "then transfer the house into my name. That's the only way I'll even consider talking to you." Olivia's mask slipped, and for a moment, her anger was clear. "You're asking too much," she snapped. But Brian, realizing they had no leverage, reluctantly agreed. "Fine," he said through gritted teeth. "We'll sign the papers." It felt like a small victory, but I wasn't naive. I knew this wasn't the end. Gaining control of the house was a step forward, but the real fight, for justice, was still ahead. For the first time, though, I felt like the scales were tipping in my favor. 2 weeks later, Brian and Olivia returned with the legal documents to transfer the house into my name. My lawyer, Rachel, carefully reviewed every detail to make sure there were no loopholes. Once everything was clear, I signed the papers, and the house was legally mine. It was a big step toward reclaiming my independence. With the house secured, Rachel and I focused on the criminal charges against Olivia. The evidence was solid. The doctor's report, photos of my injury, and threatening text messages Olivia sent after the attack. Brian's failure to act only added to the case, proving the toxic environment I had endured. When the court date came, I walked into the courtroom feeling both nervous and determined. Brian and Olivia sat at the defendant's table, their faces a mix of indifference and barely concealed anger. Olivia's lawyer tried to dismiss the incident as a family misunderstanding caused by stress, but the evidence told a different story, one of greed, manipulation, and outright violence. Rachel's arguments were clear and sharp. She didn't just focus on the physical assault, but also highlighted the financial exploitation and emotional abuse I had suffered. The courtroom fell silent as the full weight of the evidence became undeniable. "This is not a misunderstanding," Rachel told the judge firmly. "This is repeated abuse, ending in a violent attack that could have caused serious harm." The judge listened carefully, reviewing all the evidence. When it was Olivia's turn to speak, she tried to justify her actions, claiming she had been pushed to her limit. But her lack of real remorse was obvious to everyone in the room. After deliberating, the judge made a clear decision. Olivia was sentenced to 7 months in jail for aggravated assault and ordered to pay $7,000 in damages. While Brian wasn't charged criminally, the judge called him out for failing to protect me, saying his behavior was deeply disappointing. As I left the courtroom, I felt like a huge weight had been lifted from my shoulders. Justice had been served. Olivia and Brian no longer had control over me, and for the first time in months, I could imagine a better future. With the court case behind me, I was free to rebuild my life. The house, now legally mine, became more than just a home. It was a symbol of everything I had fought for. But it wasn't just about owning the house. It was about reclaiming my dignity, independence, and future. My parents were my biggest support during this time. Their love and encouragement gave me the strength I had been missing for so long. They reminded me to focus on myself, and for the first time in a long while, I felt safe enough to do just that. I threw myself into my consulting business with new energy. Work became an outlet for me, a way to turn my pain into something productive. I took on bigger challenges, expanded my client base, and even started mentoring younger professionals entering the field. Helping others while rebuilding my career gave me a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. Outside of work, I found a new passion in supporting other women who had experienced abuse. I reached out to local organizations and started volunteering. By sharing my story, I hoped to inspire others. Turning my pain into something positive was empowering, and I realized I wasn't alone. Many women had faced similar struggles and found their strength, just like I was finding mine. Brian tried to reach out to me a few times after the court case, but I blocked him on every platform. I had no interest in hearing his excuses or letting him manipulate me again. Olivia's jail sentence was a clear reminder that actions have consequences, and I hoped it would stop her from hurting anyone else in the future. As the weeks turned into months, I began to heal, physically, emotionally, and mentally. My parents' love, my work, and my new purpose gave me the strength to keep moving forward. Little by little, I was building a life that was truly mine. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was thriving. I was building a life on my own terms, based on my values and self-worth. Looking back, it's hard to believe how much has changed. The bruises on my head healed quickly, but the emotional scars took longer. Even so, every moment of pain taught me important lessons about my strength, my value, and the need to stand up for myself. Reclaiming my independence wasn't just about winning in court or securing the house. It was about proving to myself that I deserved better. I had endured years of manipulation and betrayal, but I refused to let those experiences define me. Instead, I used them as motivation to rebuild a life where I was in control. My consulting business has grown more than I ever imagined. Without the toxic presence of Brian and Olivia, I've been able to focus fully on my goals. I've expanded my services, taken on leadership roles in my field, and even received recognition for my work. Every success feels like proof of the strength I found within myself. Beyond work, I've found purpose in helping others. Sharing my story with women in similar situations has been deeply rewarding. It reminds me that my journey wasn't just about taking back my life, it was also about empowering others to do the same. Brian and Olivia are no longer part of my life, and I'm at peace with that. Their attempts to control and hurt me are in the past, and I've made sure they can never harm me again. The house they once tried to use against me has become a place of safety and freedom. As I move forward, I carry the lessons of this chapter with me. I've learned that self-worth is non-negotiable and that true strength comes from knowing when to walk away. My journey wasn't easy, but it shaped me into the strong, independent woman I am today. For that, I am truly grateful. My future is mine to create, and this time, I'm in charge of every choice. Thank you for joining me on this journey of resilience and growth. Stories like this remind us all how important it is to stand up for ourselves and never settle for less than we deserve. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Did this story resonate with you? What would you have done in Lauren's shoes? Let's keep the conversation going. And if you want to hear more inspiring stories, be sure to like this post and share it with others. Together, we can remind each other to stay strong and never stop striving for the life we deserve.